In the previous lesson, we talked about lighting, we talked about setting the scene, we talked about where to place the camera. In this lesson, we are going to talk about how to set the camera up, what options to use within the camera to get the best results. We are going to be looking at three typical types of cameras: a cell phone, a stills camera or a compact photo camera, and a video camera or a handycam, as they're sometimes called. These are the most frequently used types of cameras that you can find or you might use to record your videos. The different types of cameras will have some differences in options, but a lot of the main or most important options are going to be the same across different types of devices. Let's set the most important setting first, the resolution of the video. Here, I recommend using 1080p or Full HD as your option, if that's available in your camera. That is going to give you a very good balance between quality and high resolution, but also very compatible with a lot of editing software. It's not going to be too difficult to work with, and the file sizes are not going to be huge. On some devices, you might be able to go above 1080p up to 4K, but I wouldn't recommend using that. That is going to produce very big files that you're going to have a hard time managing. You're going to need a lot more storage for it, a lot better computer to edit it, and it's not going to give you such a big jump in quality that it would be worth the hassle. You can go down from 1080p down to 720p, sometimes called regular HD. That is still a pretty good quality video, so if that's all you've got available, or you have storage concerns, you don't have a big hard drive and you want to save space, it's fine to go down to 720p as well. That's still going to give you pretty good quality video. But the best option is always going to be 1080p Full HD. After resolution, the next most important option is going to be to set the FPS or frames per second or frame rate of your video. Here, again, I have a very simple recommendation. Always use 30 FPS or 29.97 FPS if those are available in your camera. The two are basically the same thing. There is a very little difference between them. Some cameras will have one, some cameras will have the other. There's not really any big reason to choose one over the other, whichever you have available. Again, there might be other options in your camera, higher frame rate, 60 FPS, even maybe 120 FPS sometimes, or lower frame rates, 25, 24, something like that. You can choose these, but again, 30 FPS is going to be a nice balance between quality and manageable file sizes. One very important point is that if you're using multiple cameras to record, for example, one to record yourself, another to record whatever you're showing off on the table in front of you, definitely make sure that the two cameras have the same frame rate set. If you want to synchronize them afterwards in post-production on the computer, it's going to be very difficult to synchronize two videos that have a different frame rate, one 25 and the other is 30, for example. Let's now look at how we would set resolution and frame rate on these three different types of cameras.
First off, with a stills camera, you're usually going to find a separate group of settings for video or movie setup in this case. Here you want to select movie mode. In this particular camera, you are able to set the resolution and the frame rate in the same setting. So the left number, 720 or 1080, is going to be your resolution, and the number on the right, in this case I'm selecting 50p just to show you how to change the setting, is going to be your frame rate. On a phone, I'm looking at an iPhone in this case, you're going to usually have settings for your camera in the main settings app on the phone. So here I'm selecting camera and I can pick video recording settings. Just as with the stills camera, I have the settings combined, resolution and frame rate in the same setting. With turning off PAL formats, you don't need to worry about what that is. You have a few more options, so if you need those to match settings in your other camera, feel free to turn that on. It's not gonna ruin anything for you. On a camcorder, sometimes you'll have fewer settings. In this case, you just have two settings for quality, highest and high. So both of these are gonna give you the same resolution, just at different qualities. So obviously pick the highest one you can. for frame rate, you can go back into the menu and you have a separate setting for it. So you can select from 3 frame rates on this camera. Obviously pick the one that matches with your other camera the best if you need to.
Next up, let's talk about exposure and brightness. In the previous lesson, we talked about how to use a window or artificial light or lamps to light your scene and to have things look as bright as you want them to be. Now we're going to look at the camera settings side of how to do that. First of all, if you're using a stills camera like this one to record your video, make sure to have your mode dial or your mode selection in the camera set to P mode or automatic if that's an option for you. This is going to let the camera decide on all the details of the exposure, so you don't need to worry about that. On mobile phones and on video cameras, this is not going to be an issue. Those 2 options are usually going to have automatic settings by default, so you won't need to worry about them. But on photography cameras, this is something you should make sure to set. After that, you can again make a test recording like we talked about in the previous lesson to see how your image looks. And if you feel like it's a little bit too bright or a little bit too dark, you can change that. You can use exposure compensation to brighten or darken the image. You're going to have to do that differently depending on what camera you're using. So let's look at how to set exposure compensation, how to brighten or darken your image on a phone, on a camera, or on a video camera.
First, on the stills camera, you'll usually have a separate dial or a button and the dial combination to change your brightness. On this Fujifilm, it's going to be the top right dial. If you turn it, the image will get brighter or darker, and this is basically telling the camera how to change the automatic settings in order to get a brighter image. On a phone, usually you'll be able to tap in the camera and you see this little box pop up, and next to it or under it you're going to have a slider. Drag on that slider and you're changing the exposure setting. Finally, for the camcorder, you're going to have to go into the menu again, and here you'll have a separate setting for exposure. By default it's set to auto, but I'm changing it to manual, and here it gives me the option to basically just change the brightness. The camera is still going to decide on everything else automatically. I can just tell it how bright or dark I want the image.
Next, let's talk about audio recording and loudness. In some cameras, like a photography camera or a video camera, some video cameras at least, you're going to be able to set the level of audio recording or how loud the recording is going to be. If that's an option, it might be worth to look at and make a test recording and listen back, watch back, and check if it's loud enough, if it's not too loud, if it's not so loud that it's distorting, and change the audio level or the loudness depending on what you're seeing in your test recording. One good tip is if your camera has an indicator of how loud your recording is while you're recording, to check that little scale and make sure that even at your loudest speaking voice or even at high peaks in your speech, the needle in the scale never reaches the top. So if it reaches the top, pull back the audio level a little bit in the settings to make sure that it stays just below the top, because if it reaches the top, it's going to result in distorted or not very good sounding recording, so you should definitely avoid that. Most probably your phone is not going to have any options to change the audio volume of the recording, so you don't have to worry about that. And the final option we should talk about is file format. Now here, you might or might not have options. Most cameras will have at least some options to choose what file format you want to record your videos in. If you have this option, you should pick a format that is going to be widely usable, that you're going to be able to edit in your video editing software. In most cases, an MP4 file format is going to be an option. If it's there, select that. That is probably gonna give you the best results in terms of being able to play the video on many devices and being able to edit the video in your editing software. For all the different types of and brands of cameras, you're going to have different options for file formats. So you can read up on it, or you can just make a test recording, get it off the camera and onto your computer and try and edit it in your software. If it works, you're good. If it doesn't, pick a different format in the camera and make a test recording and try with that until you find one that you're going to be able to edit well in your video editing software. Let's see where you can set these options on different cameras.
Here again, under the camera settings, I can pick a different file format. On the Handycam, the format is tied to the quality that we've selected, so there's not a lot of options here. I can just go with highest quality, and that will give me a pretty decent file format.
To sum up, set 1080p or Full HD for your resolution, 30 FPS or something close to it for your frame rate. Use MP4 or a similar file format if you can, that you're going to be able to edit well on your editing software and watch it on very different devices. And if your camera has exposure settings, make sure to set them to automatic. That is going to be your easiest and best solution. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you in the next video.